campaign and she was supposed to introduce herself to the American people. No wonder people were Googling, did Joe Biden drop out? And so,
no. But you saying 3 months wasn't long enough? It was too long.
So, apparently some people still haven't come to terms with Kamala Harris's loss in last year's election.
Like you don't know in Britain, for instance, where you have a short election, it's not like you don't know who the leader of the party is for months and years before that. But you're either the person who's Googling the day before, did Biden drop out, or you know in a week. You know, did anyone in this audience not know enough about Kamala Harris pretty much after a week?
It's been 8 months, and believe it or not, some folks are still blaming everything but Kamala for the defeat. But Bill Maher isn't having it. He thinks Kamala deserves her fair share of the blame, and he made that crystal clear when some delusional Democrats tried to defend her on his show. As always, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Let's get into it.
The thing the candidates, especially the Democrats, do to get voters annoys them. The constant texting. Did you get the text? Like from Tim Walz every 5 minutes, and like always begging for money and knocking on doors. And we've got people knocking on doors. They don't want knocking on your door. Who in this day and age wants someone knocking on? Kids don't even like it when you get a phone call. That's like too much of a invasion of their privacy.
So, Bill sets the stage perfectly by listing all the reasons voters found Kamala Harris downright unlikable. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Every item on that list was alienating, off-putting, and practically designed to repel the average voter. All Democrats had to do was sell a coherent message and trust the American people to buy in. Simple, right? But no, these geniuses didn't have a message. Instead, they spent most of their term bending over backward to please the woke mob. And when that strategy flopped, as it inevitably would, they didn't pivot to common sense. Nope. They turned to gimmicks, guilt trips, and good old-fashioned voter manipulation because why earn support when you can manufacture it? Classic.
Done anything yet, but I understand the.
This was the problem. There was a 2014 study that showed that Fortune 500 companies were more likely to pick a female CEO if the company was struggling, basically setting women up for the big job, but to also fail. If they did well, fine. But if they failed, like, look, we have a female CEO while failing. And that's what I feel like they did to Kamala Harris. When Biden refused to step aside and not run again, he was supposed to be that bridge. He backed off on that promise due to arrogance. And then he drops out after a catastrophic debate performance, and they set Kamala Harris up to...
If you've been watching this channel for a while, you already know that absurd takes from the left are nothing new. But this one deserves a trophy. Sarah Isker actually spoke as if Kamala Harris was just randomly yanked off a bench somewhere to replace Joe Biden, like she hadn't been vice president for 4 years, for long, very public, very visible years. The mental gymnastics it takes to push that narrative is Olympic level. But hey, the left loves defending its own with revisionist fairy tales. Never mind that Kamala had all the time in the world to win people over. Spoiler alert, she didn't. And Maher, to his credit, didn't let that nonsense slide. He called out Isker's delusion right to her face. No filter, no fluff. Because at some point, someone has.
No, but you saying 3 months wasn't long enough? It was too long. It was long enough. It was long enough.
If they had a primary...
It's not that they didn't have time to introduce. They met someone they didn't like them.
If they had a primary, they wouldn't have picked her. And if they had,
That's
she would have been
different.
able to rough out those edges that then she basically has to start from scratch with a campaign team she didn't hire, that didn't like her, right? It was his team. And so I wonder if that next Democratic person, maybe someone's not even on our radar yet. Because frankly, when you look at the history of who's, there's two types. The one who waited in line, who was next in line, and then there's the one who comes out. That's Obama. That's Clinton. That's Reagan to some extent.
Sarah Isker is still clinging to the tired narrative that Kamala Harris was set up to fail, as if she's some tragic political martyr. According to her, the Democrats knew Biden's campaign was a sinking ship, so instead of letting another old white man take the fall, they threw Kamala under the bus. How noble. But let's be honest, the only thing Kamala was set up for was endless media worship and softball interviews. If anything, she had the most protected political runway imaginable. Harris had the best shot at beating Trump, at least compared to other leading Democrats of the day. The problem wasn't her identity, it was her party's obsession with turning every issue into a woke talking point. Democrats didn't empower Kamala, they handicapped her with their tone-deaf pandering. And in the end, it wasn't sabotage that killed her chances. It was the message, or rather, the lack of one.
I'm going to side with Sarah about this one thing. If you're the sitting vice president for a president who has, throughout his entire term in office, been sitting at about somewhere between 35 and 40% approval rating. People view the Biden administration as a failure. We could have a long discussion about whether they are right about that, about the economy, but the perceptions of the economy were that people thought inflation was too high, but we were on the wrong track, 75% wrong track numbers, and this huge inflation overhang. You're the sitting vice president, and you get put on elevated to the top of the ticket 107 days ahead of the election. I think that is a very high degree of difficulty to put on anybody, and I do not think she is the perfect candidate. I tend to agree with Sarah that probably in a fully litigated primary, she probably would not have been the Democratic nominee, but we'll never know that.
And just when you thought the excuse factory couldn't turn out anything more ridiculous, John Hillman decided to join Sarah Isker in full damage control mode. Suddenly, the guy who spent years parroting the Bidenomics is booming mantra is now admitting that the economy was actually in shambles. Oh, now it's a problem. Weren't we told day in and day out by CNN and MSNBC that Biden had rescued the economy from the fiery ruins Trump left behind, that inflation was transitory, gas prices were fine, and grocery bills were just a vibe issue? Fast forward to today, and Hillman is trying to argue that Biden's poor economic record is what made it hard for Kamala Harris to campaign. Give me a break. At this point, even Bill Maher couldn't hide his disgust. He was practically boiling as he listened to Hillman and Isker twist themselves into knots trying to justify Kamala's failure.
Never been anybody who's had the difficulty of that situation. Elevated that late in the campaign. Why? You know this, but the Vice President of the United States is basically shoved in a broom closet for 3.5 years.
I know. She was more popular in there.
Yes, well.
I mean, there's this idea that in a mass media age, that 107 days is not long enough to know somebody.
You are way overestimating the American people in terms of what they do.
No.
You have someone like Donald Trump has become the universally known, understood, loved by some, hated by others over the course of being omnipresent.
Yeah,
8 years. Okay. Barack Obama becomes president of the United States after running for 2 years as president, runs a 50-state primary, is on television, does dozens of Democratic...
Bill Maher is about to jump in, but before he does, let's set the record straight. Kamala Harris wasn't shoved into some dark, forgotten broom closet, contrary to what her defenders would love you to believe. No, she was handed real responsibilities. Big ones. Remember the border crisis? Yeah, that little task. She completely fumbled it. Under her leadership, millions of undocumented migrants poured into the U.S. while she smiled, waved, and avoided visiting the actual border for as long as humanly possible. But wait, it gets better. She was given golden opportunities to connect with the public, like an invite to the Joe Rogan podcast, and turned them all down. Apparently, tough questions weren't on her to-do list. And the rare interviews she did agree to were an absolute circus of word salads, nervous laughter, and zero substance. So, no, Kamala wasn't sidelined. She was spotlighted, and she choked repeatedly. So that's why she wasn't popular.
You ever watch the show? But I had Michael Douglas on this week.
Yeah,
At the top, we were talking about this, and he made a very good point that every other country in the world can do it in months, sometimes weeks. Why can every other country do it in that short a period of time? Are they all that so much brighter than America? I don't think so.
well,
Mostly parliamentary. I mean, there's like literal reasons, right? We don't have a parliament.
But
We also have a First Amendment. We don't make people campaign this whole time. The American people want to give them $20 and so they can afford it. I mean, small dollar donors are arguably the worst thing that's happened to our politics as it turned out.
I think small dollar donors would make $20 billion. No.
A lot of it.
Look, Kamala Harris started off with some popularity. She had the spotlight, the media buzz, and the historic firsts narrative going strong. But here's the problem. Her party's woke obsession suffocated any chance she had at actually connecting with everyday Americans. The messaging wasn't inspiring, it was exhausting. Americans weren't looking for lectures on pronouns and privilege while they struggled to fill their gas tanks and buy groceries. That's why Kamala wasn't trusted to lead the country, not because she's a woman, not because she's a woman of color, but because she was the walking, talking mascot of everything voters had grown tired of. Meanwhile, Trump, love him or hate him, was out there promising a stronger economy, lower inflation, and fewer culture war headaches. He was blunt, relatable, and, for many, a better bet than Kamala's vague slogans and nervous cackles. The choice wasn't hard, it was survival instinct.